This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Hey guys, Jay here, welcome to EonsOfBattle. I have been always slightly intrigued by the smaller scale version of Warhammer 40,000. There used to be a game, Epic, that was epic back in the day, with tiny little versions of all of the things in Warhammer 40,000. And I've always been intrigued by things like Aeronautica Imperialis, which I actually have kind of a lot of. This game came and went really quick, and you're able to find some pretty good deals for pretty cheap. I actually have a few copies of Aeronautica Imperialis. It's just such a fun novelty to experience some of the things, some of the bigger, more epic things in Warhammer 40,000 at a smaller, more adorable scale. It's really interesting. And these guys have been sitting on my desk for a while, and I just love playing with them. They're so fun. I also have a copy of Titanicus, which was Games Workshop's, I think did Titanicus come after Aeronautica? It might have, but it was another interesting step into a smaller scale version of Warhammer 40,000. That game specifically focusing on the Titans. And then it all both these games, Titanicus and Aeronautica, died pretty quickly and were replaced by Legions Imperialis. And Legions Imperialis is similar with smaller scale versions of 40k, but it just didn't jingle my jangles, it didn't flim my flams. And the problem is the Horus heresy of it. I have a little conspiracy theory of why Legions Imperialis is set in the Horus heresy, but there's just not that much juice to squeeze. You got your rhinos and your land raiders and your space marines, but especially at an even smaller scale, I feel like there's just less interest, there's less gold to mine out of those hills because they're all gonna be the same. I've seen quite a few Legions Imperialis armies in person now, and most people seem to either go with the Horus's Legion or Blood Angels, because those kind of pop at a smaller scale. But it's just Space Marines. It's just Space Marines over and over. And my hypothesis is that Games Workshop didn't want to spend a whole bunch of money on design work, because if they're like, hey, here's the 30k Rhino, make it smaller, that's something just an engineer can do. Where if, you're just okay, so there's this thing called the Norn Queen in the Tyrannid. It's a giant superorganism that can control large swathes of the hive at once. That requires a design process, meetings. You have to figure out how to interpret the written lore. It has to be engineered and figured out and then taken and miniaturized into a small scale, where just doing the Horus Heresy right after they've already done all the design work of creating the full-scale Horus Heresy, I feel like that just streamlines the process so much. And so it makes sense, I guess, to do it locked into the Horus Heresy. But to me, I would have pre-ordered that game so hard if it was just regular 40k. If I could have Gargants and Eldar Titans and little Squigoths. If I could have all of the weird, wacky zaniness of 40k in a smaller scale, that would be my jam. Now, recently I was at the Midwest Mini Swap, swapping some minis, and there was nothing in particular that I had my eye on. There was nothing I was planning to look for there. But you never know what you're gonna find at the Mini Swap, and I uncovered something amazing. Boom! In this box is epic Warhammer 40,000. So much epic Warhammer 40,000. Somebody happened to be getting rid of their entire collection of mostly new on sprue classic epic Warhammer. I have never seen these sprues in person. They're so tiny. Look at the little orcs. As soon as I saw tables full of this stuff, I knew I couldn't let this opportunity slip by. Not only was basically everything for the game available right there, but there was also this. This Series 100 Owner's Manual contains, I'm pretty sure, every written rule for at least the second edition version of Epic, and it might be every version of Epic. So the way that this game first began, yeah, the epic 40,000 rulebook. So then this would have been the 3rd edition rulebook, but there's definitely some stuff from earlier. All of this began, I think, in 1988 with the release of this box, Battle Titans. And hilariously, this game was actually set in the Horus Heresy. They actually expanded the Horus Heresy just to make it reasonable that Titans were fighting Titans. And so this was kind of where it all started. And then after this came a game that was just simply called Space Marine, which came out with these Space Marine sprues of Land Raiders and Rhinos and itty bitty little tactical Marines. And then that got expanded into the 3rd edition of Warhammer 40,000 Epic. And that is when like the Eldar and the Orcs came in and things got a little nuts. I've owned this box for a very long time. It is still in the shrink wrap and apparently retailed for $29.99. But this, I've always loved the look of this thing on the shelf. The bright, vibrant colors. This comes with 6 Battle Titans, and it might come with the rules and things to play, but I'm not sure. But I no longer needed to come with the rules because I have the rules. I am really excited for Epic Warhammer 40,000. I've always had my eye looking at eBay at all of the little tiny things that are available, but this game has been out and dead for so long. It's hard to like find this stuff and to find it in reasonable numbers and the things that you need to play. And so it was just such a crazy opportunity. I even got some of the terrain, which is very simple little L-shaped walls and ruins. But this is everything that I would need to be playing games of Epic Warhammer 40,000, including some of the flagship units. 2 Titans, the Orc Gargant, and this guy, which I had trouble tracking this guy down, but this guy is not the same Titans that are available in this box. These are called like the Turtleback Knights. These are technically Warlord Titans, but I think if you're going off of scale, they would be much closer to Reaver Titans. This guy is a classic, I think, Warlord Titan in kind of the old, I forget the name of the Titan patterns, but this boxier, square, more Star Wars-y kind of shape is, his little thing is bent, but that's okay, he's metal. There, now it's perfect. This more boxier shape is an older mark of Battle Titan. And so I have so many little pieces of very small miniatures. Now, in researching this game, it turns out that it was beloved by its fan base, and it's kind of, in a way, still alive. There's plenty of STLs and things online to get tiny little versions of Warhammer 40,000, but then there's also NetEpic, which is a fan website that takes the rules for the 2nd edition version of Epic and is kind of continued to keep them alive and clean and polish them. And so those are kind of the official, unofficial rules for Epic Warhammer 40,000. I think there's even also rules for things that just never existed, like the Tau. But man, these old looking things, these old, like some of them are metal, some of them are plastic. These little tiny miniatures are so evocative. They're so interesting. And unfortunately, the scale of Legions Imperialis is actually bigger than this. And when you're working at this small of a scale, any change in scaling is going to be very dramatic. This game, I believe, is in 6mm scale, and Legions Imperialis is in 8mm. And so that means that Legion Space Marines are almost twice as big as these little grains of rice from the original game. So there's not a ton of cross-compatibility, but there's something to the absolute minuscule scale, because I think in the toyification of things, scaling does matter. I have this old Thunderhawk gunship, or actually not old, this is the modern Thunderhawk gunship for Legions Imperialis. Originally, it came out for Aeronautica Imperialis, and I would say this is a little bit big. This is a little too, it's got some good swishability, it's a fun toy, but in my mind, this is too big. I actually have two original metal Thunderhawk gunships from original Epic, and look at it. It's maybe a quarter of the size of this new version. And I think that quarter scaling is perfect. The scale of this version of Epic, the original version of Epic, is certainly all over the place. Even comparing an Orc Boy to this Thunderhawk gunship, it's not quite right, although it might be remarkably similar to how off the scaling is of the real Forge World Thunderhawk gunship when you compare it to a modern Primaris Space Marine. Because the Thunderhawk transport has a capacity of, I think, 20 miniatures, and you might be able to squeeze 20 of these miniatures. Maybe you could just do it at this scale, but I think this is a more fun scale. Being able to hold an entire army in your hand is so fun, and it's so weird and wacky, and it's such an interesting juxtaposition of the miniatures that exist for real Warhammer 40,000, and then to see them realized in this smaller scale is just dramatic. I think the Games Workshop really missed out on taking Legions Imperialis and making it Horus Heresy, because there's a lot of people who play 40k and then a smaller number of people who play Heresy. And so there's probably an even smaller number of people who want to experience the Horus Heresy at a smaller scale. But if you take the giant fan base of 40k, there's presumably people who would be more interested in playing 40k at this tiny epic scale where you have 5 to 10 miniatures on a little base, when putting together a squad of guys might take a few minutes. How long could it possibly take to paint an Orc Boy who's like 4 millimeters tall? And that's a tall Orc Boy. There's also Gretchen that are even smaller than that. Honestly, these tiny epic Gretchen are almost more detailed than the Gretchen miniatures that we got in Warhammer 40,000 2nd edition. The classic, like, one piece of plastic grot. These guys almost look a little bit better. And they're the size of mini M&Ms. These models are such an interesting blast from the past. And I've got so much here. I've got a good amount of orcs, and I've got a good amount of space marines. And I do have a smattering of some other stuff. I imagine Sean is going to want to partake in this too. And so I got some Imperial Guard basilisks, and there is a Baneblade in this mess somewhere. Where did he go? There it is. See, this is the scale I'm talking about. This is a Baneblade. Sean's Baneblade is sitting over there in pieces. And it's, humongous, arguably too big for games of real Warhammer 40,000. And then this little thing, smaller than an Oreo cookie, is a mega tank, is a absolute monstrous behemoth. And it's just a little guy. It's just the cutest little guy. It's so interesting to see the transformation from large scale 40k into this smaller scale. And this game, it had legs. It existed for decades. It had different editions. People complain now about the rapid fire edition changes of Warhammer 40,000, but I think some people don't quite remember there were a lot of edition changes back in the day. And often White Dwarf rules would come out, and they would kind of fix some of the broken problems of these games and then add in new rules. And so there's always been pretty good rule churn in all games of Warhammer 40,000. And it's just kind of the nature of miniature wargaming. When it's not a computer game where you've got thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people playing many, many games and you can instantly see that data, when you're kind of just running everything off of community feedback, things tend to run a little bit more rough and tumble. But it does make for a really interesting kind of living system that is really, really fun to play with. Now that I have my hands on all of this stuff, I've been thinking about what to do with it, because I certainly want to put together an army. I have a massive Black Templar collection. That's basically what I play when I play real Warhammer 40,000. But I don't think I want to paint this stuff in Black Templars, at least not all of it, because black is not the most fun color to paint. And at this scale, I really don't feel like I could do a lot with them. I think this is going to be a wonderful opportunity to paint up some Imperial Fists. I think these guys would look really, really good in yellow. think it would look fantastic on the tanks. It would look fantastic on the little troopers. And maybe for a couple of squads here and there, I will paint them in Black Templars. They are a successor chapter to the Imperial Fists, and the Imperial Fist Space Marines are some of the only Space Marines that the Black Templar actually get along with. So I feel like it would be fun. I do think I've got some Assault Marines. Maybe if the Assault Marines were all Black Templar, like we've got Tactical Marines, we've got Assault Marines, we've got Space Marine bikes, and no plastic Space Marine bike has ever looked like these bikes. We got a handful of Terminators. There's even the characters. We've got a little Ancient, a Tech Marine, a Librarian, we've got an Apothecary, a Chaplain, and these two guys, which I think are Scouts. Yeah, they must be Scouts because they've got real prominent cod pieces. So that's how you know that those guys are Space Marine Scouts. These tiny little miniatures, even though they're so kind of lumpy and a little weird, there is something special about these little lumps of plastic. They feel so different from your classic Warhammer 40,000 fare, and I'm really intrigued to see what it's like to paint them up. Also, question, so when I'm painting these guys, is it every single thing on a base is one miniature, or is each individual guy get to count as one mini? Because if that's the case, then my living document of every miniature I've ever painted is going to be exploding in the somewhat near future. But I kind of feel like it is every single guy per base. So a giant army of Legion Imperialis, or of epic Warhammer 40,000, is still only gonna be, 30 miniatures? Maybe a little bit more than that. A lot of it is taken up by the vehicles, which don't have bases. And so every individual Land Raider is gonna be its own guy. This has gotta be one of the most intriguing pieces in my vast Warhammer 40,000 collection. I have quite a bit of old, like 2nd edition and 3rd edition Warhammer. I've got far too much new current Warhammer. And now I've even got my hands on some epic. And I have all sorts of amazing hobby tools available on EonsOfBattle.com. Over there, we're all restocked on our excellent hobby goodies: Gamer Grass Tufts, Great Tide Studio Bits for your Space Marines, Army Painter paints, brushes, base and cork, ultra thin and ultra thick super glue, and we've got terrain. It's the best way to support us doing what we do by getting a membership. Each month, members get a credit good for any one terrain pack we've ever made or the brand new one. This July, we have created the Bocage Battlefield Terrain, a series of pieces perfect for putting together a historic landscape for games of Conflict 47, Bolt Action, or any war zone with a labyrinth of overgrown hedgerows. These pieces will funnel your infantry into tight firefights while hiding the mysterious shack. Maybe it's just a utility building, or maybe it's an improvised encampment, hiding some flesh-eating zombies kept on ice for the right moment to unleash a devastating outbreak. This set was designed by us and is available at EonsOfBattle.com. This is an absolutely massive horde of miniatures, but hilariously, it's epic Warhammer 40,000, so it all fits in one relatively small tote box. But there's so much here. There's so much here to sink my teeth into. Base is this? Like there's pieces of Warhammer that I have never seen before. There's sprues that I've never touched. There's miniatures that I have never seen. And back in the Dizzy, this was a fully fledged game. There's, I think, what is this sprue? These are Battle Wagon sprues. Do I have Battle Wagon bodies? I might not. I might have to sacrifice some rhinos to the orc gods. Although, I think there are some in here. Yeah, now we're talking. This is a battle wagon. It's got the Def Rolla. It's got the Def Rolla that we all know and love from big Warhammer 40,000 on this little tiny thing. This is a lot of things that we know and love from Warhammer 40,000 did originate in the game Epic. A lot of the Eldar range, a lot of the Orc range. Some of them even pop up every now and then in the more modern game of Warhammer 40,000, things that originated in this old epic scale. An orc buggy, a little orc buggy. And Games Workshop just released 5 of these guys a couple of years ago for the game Warhammer 40,000. These hadn't even been seen, like they came out in Epic, and then they might have came out in Gorka Morka, or they maybe were contemporary. But there was the Gorka Morka buggy, and then the buggy kind of existed in 40K, and then it ceased to exist in 40K for like 20 years, and then it came back as like the shock jump dragsta and the Squig Bomber Launcher and all of those weird little vehicles that are now in 40K, they had their start as this little thing that can fit on my thumb. Absolutely adorable. It's so fun, it's so intriguing, and I can't wait to get deep into Warhammer 40,000 Epic. If you have any experience with this game, please let me know in the comments below. Like, what was it like? What can I expect out of this game? I know about the BattleNet, and I will be taking a look at that and really figuring out the rules. I am going to read every single word that has ever been written for this game. The older editions of Warhammer 40,000 are a bit of a slog to get through because they're very kind of RPG heavy, but I am ready for the challenge. This is a lot to do, but a relatively small amount of plastic because it's so incredibly small. I've still got some projects in the pipeline for my old Hammer armies, but I think Epic might be nudging some of those out because I am chomping at the bit to paint up some incredibly small Space Marines and some Orcs and a little Imperial Guard. And if I can get my hands on it, probably a little bit of Eldar too. Thanks for watching.